evening, Cedar Falls. Welcome to this City Council Administration Committee meeting. We are here tonight to discuss Administrative Policy Number 7, and we at this time will have a roll call from Madam Clerk.
Schultz.
Here.
DeBoer.
Here.
Cruz.
Here.
Harding.
Here.
Ganfield.
Here.
Sires.
Here.
Dunn.
Here.
All members present.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Or am I supposed to call you not Madam Clerk, right? What am I supposed to call you during this? Kim. Okay. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so on tonight's agenda, we are discussing any administrative or any changes to Administrative Policy Number 7. I thought, with help from a friend, that maybe the best way to head this conversation would be to maybe make a list of items of concern that council might have, and then go through that list. And obviously, if it's not brought up as a concern, then I would assume we're good with what's proposed. Is that a good proposal for everyone?
And then also just for a point of clarity, do we have a presentation? Are you doing a presentation? Or
I can answer questions.
Or you can answer questions?
Yes.
Okay, I didn't know if we had a presentation.
Whichever you prefer, Madam Chair.
Oh, well, if you have a presentation, would you like to give the presentation?
Certainly. It would take about 15 minutes.
Okay, I'm okay with that.
I'm okay with it.
So, yeah, thank you very much, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to address the committee. Just as a housekeeping item, as mayor, I'm not a member of this body, so once I give my presentation, it's over. I won't interject at all, and that's something I feel is very important for respecting the role of the committees, so you can make the decisions, have the conversations you need. So I just want to be clear about that. So going back to the last council meeting, there was a referral that went back to the admin committee that asked for consideration of addition or a change to the referral process to clarify or discuss how that would operate. And then also, Councilmember Ganfield had asked for a request for a second public forum opportunity. Those both are political questions, political changes. But at the end of that, there was a question or an aspect of general changes or changes more generally. And so as mayor, I've been taking studious notes for the past 5 years on the existing admin policy number 7. And over time, we've made some small tweaks to it, but there are some more systematic or system changes that I think are worthwhile. And in some cases, I think they're greatly overdue. I would also refer, as you have questions too, the city attorney and he's helped me to draft these changes to make sure they were legal. And I believe that all of them would help the meeting flow a little better. But then if the council decides that you don't want to consider that, or if you only want to consider parts of it, that's completely fine too. And each proposal would work individually as well. So I'll just walk through some of those, for the proposed changes. There were 33 of them, some very simple, others a little bit more detailed and political. I'll call out the ones that are either political or are something where it maybe changes the balance of power, gives the mayor more authority, gives council more authority, and I very much hope to be able to do that in just 15 minutes. So I'm going to get my watch out here, my timer, make sure I stay on track. So 5:54 now. I'm going to try to get through everything by 6:10, and then open it up for the rest for just council discussion and questions, and I'll be available if you have additional questions asked. So the first on that proposed changes list that I provided to council as a memo, it's the title and the numbering of the document itself. So where these are called city council meeting procedures, if we look in Robert's rules, these are by standard special rules of order. So I'm proposing that we change these to actually be the city council special rules of order to match parliamentary language. Item 2 is the format of the document. So you've seen in the past admin policy number 7, I felt was a little bit jumbled. It was a little hard to follow sometime. So just like with the council goal setting document, I've restructured it to hopefully, if you would see, be a little bit easier to read and to follow. And it also as with the organization for the proposed change 3, it would be to split them into topical parts 1 through 10, put all of the public participation related items to the very back, and then move the important parts, like Rule 38 says how you can change the admin policy documents. I've moved that to the front because it's a very important consideration for the entire document. So those changes like that don't modify how the council meets. It's meant more as an aid for mayors and for the presiding officers, like you as Madam Chair, to be able to follow how the rules would work. Under item 4, I've spelled out that 2/3 majority of members under Rule 1.7. It would say that a 2/3 majority of members can overrule a presiding officer's decision in meetings. That already does exist, but I just want to make that clear at the start of the document that the council, the supermajority, has full control over the council meetings if you desire to exercise that. Also, I've added in as a change a 2/3 requirement to rule about overriding the presiding officer decisions on time limits for speakers. So it's very common in the document that it talks about overriding the mayor or the presiding officer with a 2/3 majority, so 5 members. So I just wanted to make that consistent through the document. And I feel that meets the intent of the council. For Rule 2.4, it talks about how council members are allowed to remote in for meetings, and that it would need 12 hours of advance notice in order to remote in, just so that the tech support people can be sure to have things set up properly. So I hope that that's an okay change. And then also requiring the cameras to be turned on for members. So I don't know if Councilmember Ganfield is doing that now, but or maybe that's not even possible. Maybe his connection is bad, so the chair could decide that. But I think it's, oh, there he is. But I think it's very important for the public to be able to see council members and for the council to see if there's confusion or even if they've dropped off the line. And that's why I've never really liked phone calls, because it's hard to tell if somebody's there. So those are more small procedural changes. A big one under item 6 is I recommend adding the Pledge of Allegiance to the start of the regular council meeting. It's an important civic custom that helps to provide a common sense of purpose and unity at the start of council meetings. And Waterloo City Council, Hudson City Council, Waverly, the Blackhawk County Board of Supervisors all start with the Pledge of Allegiance. And ever since I've started on council, I've always felt it missing when I start the meeting. And I hope that as a committee you agree. Change number 7, it's Rule 3.1G. It would rename the staff updates that currently occur at the back of the meeting. It would rename it to Report of Officers, which is the standard parliamentary language for it, and would shift that segment to the meeting start. I've talked with Mr. Gaines about it. He doesn't have a concern about doing that. I think it's a good idea because it then allows, if there's important announcements or things that the staff needs to present, they do it at the start of the meeting when hopefully we have the most number of people watching. And then as questions come up through the course of the meeting, if the public has questions or the council has questions, there's time through the meeting to get to that, get that asked at the end of the meeting, where now it just sort of pops off at the very end. It's like, oh, Ron, do you have, or Mr. Gaines, do you have any updates? No. Well, I'd like to make that a little bit more formal. So that's why I'm asking for Report of Officers at the start. Next change, looking at it's number 8. It's Rule 3.1 L. That's an important political part that's for discussion, especially tonight. It would add a second public forum to allow the public to comment or ask questions related to items that were either passed or not passed on the meeting's agenda. So my recommendation is, yes, allow it, but require that it be related only to items that were on the agenda, no other topics. And then also a 3-minute time limit is what I'm recommending. So that honestly is up to the council to debate the wisdom of that. I see merit in it, but I'm going to trust the wisdom of the group on it for the final decision. Item 9 moves, or for Rule 3.1, currently it's called council referrals. I'd just like to change the name of that to referral requests, because only the full council can make a referral. And it's nomenclature more than anything, but I want to make it clear that it's the whole council that makes that consideration. 3.1J, that's item 10 on the list, is renaming council updates to general discussion and announcements. And that also is a change to standard parliamentary practice. I've wondered what council updates, like what that really means or what that's intended for, and it seems like we're using it for discussion with staff. We would just want to make clear in the document that the purpose, you can make announcements and engage staff with questions, but you can't bring up entire new topics that really have to be decided as a public meeting. So we can clarify or make that clear. A few other small changes, labeling points 11 and 12 were to make things a little bit clearer in the document. 13 is for Rule 4.1. I would like to propose changing the person who would lead a council member. If the mayor doesn't show, the mayor pro tem doesn't show, if for some reason those two aren't there and can't meet, I think that it makes the most sense to have the chair of the administration committee lead that meeting. So again, it's a political question, but it's a request that I'm making tonight. We talked like 14, the change 14 for Rule 4.3 would just add a requirement for a roll call at all meetings, which we're basically already doing, but just to clarify that. Item 15 on my request list is Rule 4.4, which would change the term mayor to presiding officer throughout most of the document. And that style change is to account for the fact that the chairs of the committee also have to conform with most of these standing or the special rules while leading their meetings. So it refers to mayor, but it's actually meaning the presiding officer. So hopefully that's seen as a straightforward change. I also added in for Rule 4.11 that members can interrupt the meetings at any time for a point of order or for a point of privilege. And then later I define what that is. So Rule 4.18 and 4.19 would describe what points of order and points of privilege are. They're not defined in the document. They're in Robert's rules. I'd like to see them used more so that council members feel comfortable interrupting if something is amiss in the meeting. Here's a kind of a political one for item 18 that I'm recommending. Rule 5.18 would be a change to procedure so that items in the consent and resolution calendar wouldn't need to be read by the full title, as I've always done. Instead, we would specify they could be stated by number. And I'm happy to explain if you have questions about that later, but just so that I'm not having to read through the entire laundry list of items when by that point it's already too late to bring them up. A member can't just say, oh, I wanted to call that one up. Well, by that point you can't. So there's really, I don't see value in reading it, and that's when people tend to disengage is when I'm reading through that list. So I recommend just making it reading by number. Now, for 19, 20, and 21, it just describes a little bit about the power of the committees, the purpose of them. It's not a change to it, but it just clarifies it in the document of what the committees are meant for. Item 22 is a change, or Rule 6.5, and this is something that would be a political question. It would establish that for a committee meeting like for now, if Councilmember Dunn weren't here, something happened, hopefully not car accident, but if something urgent came up, you couldn't be here, but the meeting still had to happen. We don't have a vice chair, so it's like who takes over at that point? It could be a council vote or whatever. I would like to specify in the council rules that it's the mayor pro tem who takes over as the chair at that point. Let's see. Other big ones. Okay, item 25 is for Part 8. That's something that you had asked for. It's a entirely new text for how council referral requests would be handled. And this is something I drafted based on input from some council members and from staff on what might work well. So that would probably be I think the big meat of what is discussed tonight is whether, as the document or the draft says, whether you would require written referrals every time. Unless something comes up in the meeting, then a council member could say, yes, this is an exigent referral. I would like us to refer X item. And then the mayor or the presiding officer would decide if that actually was something that night or if it should have been brought up earlier. So it gets it off the council's plate of having to say, oh, well, that wasn't something we talked about tonight. It'd be up to the mayor to make that decision, but could be overruled by 2/3 council majority. I'm going to look on time here. Okay, about 5 minutes left here. I'm at 26 already. Great. So Part 9, item 26, it's a new text which explains the purpose of work sessions and how they're to be conducted. Work sessions are a council meeting under the open meetings law, but it doesn't get talked about at all in our meeting procedures. So I think it's important for us to add that in and explain how work sessions operate, especially things like we don't use parliamentary procedure for them, but we also don't take public comment during that time. I think it's more important, like it's such an important meeting that I don't want it just to be left to custom. I want it spelled out so it's fair to the public to know what to expect. So that's 26. 27, for part 10, I just pulled everything that was related to public participation into one section, so it's easier for the public to refer to everything together. And it will fit on a single sheet of paper, front and back, once it's done, and that's on purpose. So we can get rid of the handouts that we do separately and just put out this human read. It's not jargony. It's meant for the public to understand. So that they have exactly what we have for the rules. Okay, so then down to 28, I just have added in that speakers always have to address the chair. And it's a practice that I've already have in place, and it's standard parliamentary rules, but it just makes it clear that for somebody who gets that document and is reading it and seeing, okay, how do I do this at the podium, they know then that they always address the chair. Okay, so then 29 also is that political item of establishing that the public will have the opportunity to comment on an item where a vote is taken. And that's listed as the new Rule 10.2a, if you're willing to adopt the new numbering format. It's something we basically already do, but I think it's an important public right, so much so that it should be upgraded from just a custom to a rule. So that would mean that if we're taking a motion for a vote at a committee meeting, the public would have the opportunity to speak before that vote's taken. And then also at a council meeting, anytime there was an item that was being voted on, or there was an amendment and there was a vote before that, the public would have the chance to speak. We do that already. It works really well, and I just want to note that in the document as a rule. 10.2, 10.2c is item 30 on my list. We already allow the presiding officer to establish a fixed total time limit. We haven't really had to do that lately, but if there was a large meeting and 100 people, there might be a need to say, okay, we're going to take comments, but we're going to cap it at 20 minutes or 30 minutes. And so you should be able to get the voice of the people in 30 minutes, especially if they're kind of repeating themselves or people are repeating each other. So it would be not like the way the language is now. It says the presiding officer decides it and then has to be overruled if the council wants to provide more time. But in this case, I just changed it to say that the fixed time limit would be established by consensus at the start. Before I say, council, do you mind if we have a limit, or are there any objections to a 30-minute total time limit? And then head nods, and then we're okay to proceed. 10.2d is related to how the public comes forward to, and what sorts of things the presiding officer can rule a public member out of order for. He had concerns about the term, I think is impertinent remarks. And so there are some real First Amendment questions of what's uncivil, what's threatening. So that clarifies that there's a very strict limit to what the public, or to what we can prevent the public from saying. If they happen not to like us, they're allowed to say that, but if they threaten, then that's a totally different ballgame. So that clarifies that. And also in the last meeting, I didn't realize that in the rules, it specifies that speakers are supposed to be barred from speaking if their remarks are uncivil or if they're called out of order once. I gave 3 strikes, and that person didn't get to the 3 strikes until the very end. Now I realize you're supposed to stop in the first instance, and I'll be more careful of that in the future, unless council wants to change that rule. So that is 3 strikes. Political question. Just 2 to go here. Rule 10.3c, I've modified that so that there's more clarity to the rule against campaigning at the speaker podium. Right now, it basically says candidates can't campaign on their own behalf. but this enlarges it, and I think that's the intent, so that other people can't stump for a candidate as well. So that just clarifies that language, and also puts a prohibition on materials at the council meeting. So if somebody is wearing a political button, whether it's for a council candidate or for a national or state candidate, it just causes trouble within the meeting. Like, for good order and discipline, we want to keep this as neutral ground as possible. So I would very much like to be able to enforce that, and this would clarify to make that the case. And then the last thing is, for Rule 33, 10.7, would just add in that the public can record any meeting that they wish for an open meeting. That already exists in state code, but I want, it's so important, I want the public to know that if they bring out their camera and they record, totally fine. But state law does allow us to provide some guidelines on how that can be done, so they can't be right in our face. But as long as it's not disruptive, we certainly would allow that. If it was disruptive, we find a way to make it work. So those are all the changes. And again, some of these are political questions. I felt like it was my duty, based on the knowledge I had and from talking with staff, to make these proposals. But I realize it's beyond the original scope of what the request was. But I feel good knowing that I've put these forward, and we'll leave that to the council's discretion on how you want to proceed. So thank you very much. I will stay here for questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess I have if it's okay, I'll just read. I wrote down a few things that maybe that I've started a list. Might as well know what's already on it. Second, public forum. I feel like that's probably something we're going to want to talk about with this group. The referral process changes that are proposed. The Pledge of Allegiance, and then the 3 strikes versus 1 strike. So that's what I've got so far. Is there anything else, fellow council members, that you would like on this list to talk about? Concerns?
May I make
Yes.
one note? If this if you have things that you do wish to pass, it would have to pass by 5 members at the regular council meeting. So just be aware of that. It's not a simple majority. Any change to the document is a 2/3 majority.
Okay, thank you.
You want my list?
Yeah, go for it.
1, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10, 13, 18, 30.
Okay, I don't even write that fast. Okay, are these like the whole? So number 1.
1, 5, 7 on the first page.
Okay.
8, 9, 10,
8, 9, 10. Okay.
13 and 18.
13 and 18. Okay.
Number 30.
Number 30. Okay.
I'm not sure when you read yours what your numbers were, if those were any duplicates to what you just said.
Sure. Okay, sounds good. Anyone else have anything they want to add to the list? We can obviously, I think, add more if we need to, but
I'd have a variety of things here, and I don't know, I think maybe we should just jump into them and as we go. I don't know,
like jump into the list I already
like,
have.
Go to the first page and say, okay, we already got most of them we got to talk about.
Sure. Let's just start with the list we already have, and then we can go from there. Okay. So, okay. When you say, I'm sorry, Councilwoman DeBer, is it rule number 1, scope of rules?
I'm looking at the proposed changes.
Okay.
Number 1,
in
title and
highlighted
numbering.
parts. Okay. Sorry, I need to get there.
It's on page 205 of the document, or page 3.
Okay. I apologize. Okay, I'm ready. Let's go ahead and start the conversation. I'll get to where I need to be.
Well, I'm fine with the numbering part of it, because it's actually 2 parts, but where we change the name from City Council Meeting Procedures to City Council Special Rules of Order. I think when you start, I understand it might be in Robert's Rules of Order, but when you say Special Rules of Order, it makes it sound like it's not the standard to do all the time, but only for special meetings. So I'd prefer to leave it as City Council Meeting Procedures, and I'm fine with the numbering, but not to change the name, because I do find it confusing.
Okay. Does anybody?
I'm fine with that, leaving the name the same.
Yeah.
I think the number thing is, for me, more clear. It helps clear it up, so I like that. But leaving the name the same would be fine.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
I think my understanding is that this whole group of information here is if I should use the word hodgepodge or a collection or between parliamentary procedures and Robert's rules, so it's not going to fit either one clearly. So just calling it the meeting procedures is fine.
Anybody else have any other thoughts they want to throw in on possibly changing it or leaving it the same?
I have a question for Kevin. Do we have to vote on each one of these to see if you have the 5 votes? Like to do the number, obviously the first part of it is where it doesn't sound like we're changing, but if we want to change and use the numbering, do we have to vote on each item to do that?
So there'll be a recommendation come out of this committee, and I think it's going to be helpful to staff and the mayor for drafting purposes to either come back for another round at the committee or to regular council if we keep track of consensus on each change that council desires. I know Kim's going to be hard at work. I'll be hard at work trying to keep track of it if we can. And then at the end, something like recommendation of approval or disapproval with the changes noted would be sufficient direction.
Okay, so I believe that we have consensus, if I'm seeing head nods, to keep it the same and not make a change with the name of the document.
And it sounds like we're in consensus also on the numbering.
Yeah.
Right,
Correct.
yes, okay, I'm sorry. Yes, Mr. Mayor.
I was wondering if he was going to explain why the special, because I agree with Susan, when you start labeling things as special, it takes it out of, it's not the standardized. So I thought the mayor was going to explain that, but.
With special rules, I was thinking about that as well, of what a best name for it would be. We've adopted Robert's rules as our rules of order, our standing rules. So in Robert's rules, Part 216 says, special rules of order supersede any rules in the parliamentary authority with which they may conflict. The average society has adopted suitable parliamentary authority and seldom needs special rules of order. In our case, using Robert's rules as the standard rules, that's where I had ours as special rules. So it doesn't change at the end of the day, same type of meeting.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
And question for the numbering. So right now it's admin policy number 7, and under the new system that's being worked, this wouldn't be an admin policy, which admin policies are all approved by the administrator. This has always been really outside of that, and I believe the only reason it was called an admin policy was so that they could get it printed out and include it in the binder that went out. So there was a discussion with the city attorney and with the city clerk about that it just didn't make sense to keep it in the admin policies, so that's why I drew it out as a separate document.
Okay, anything else for item number 1 that we're talking about? Anybody else? Okay, so next item, and Councilwoman DeBur, you mean item number 5 that says council actions, and then it's struck out to be motions. That's what we're discussing for item number 5?
Well, it says Rule 2.4, guidelines for remoting in for council meetings.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Number 5, first page,
We're using the mayor's memo.
Right, well.
those changes.
On,
Yeah.
okay, we're talking for the rules. Okay, there we go. Okay, I apologize.
See,
Okay, item number 5, Rule 2.4, okay?
when I read this, it makes it sound like your only option is to do Zoom, which I think Zoom requires a few more staff. In the past, we also used to use a telephone system where you could call in, and it required the city clerk to simply dial a number. And when I read this rule, it makes it sound like that would not be an option, especially when you sit there and say, well, cameras also must be required to be turned on, because when you call in simply by phone, obviously you have no camera. But I don't think we want to eliminate that call-in, because it was a valuable tool that we used to use, and like I said, it didn't require as much staff.
Anyone else want to?
Along with that, situations where the camera would not work because of bandwidth, I assume. If you don't have the camera on, are you considered not present, even though you hear the discussion? What's the penalty? Because I don't think that should be
Sure.
forced.
Gil, Councilman Schultz?
Gil's fine. Mr. Rogers, is there a legal obligation to have a physical presence, or is voice okay?
Voice is okay.
I do think it's nice that you have to give some notice to staff if they are doing Zoom, because it does require some setup. But I don't know how many hours they need, if it's 12 or more than that.
Could we get a clarification, since if we have 12 hours notice and the presiding officer is running Zoom, how much work does it take on staff's part to set it up and run it if we have the presiding officer running it?
Well, yeah, Ron was just saying too, I think it might depend. If we're talking about a phone call, and we go to that, that's probably not as much. If it's Zoom, I know, like, for instance, today, I think they did a practice run with Councilperson Ganfield just to make sure the connection's okay and that. So, it does take some time to do that. I think the only concern about the 12-hour notice is just because meetings are on Mondays, does 12 hours really mean, is that Sunday afternoon to let know on a Monday? That's, you know what I'm saying, that for staff. If it was on a Tuesday, that would make more sense, but I'm just concerned a little bit about the Monday. People might be scrambling on that day to try to figure out, so I would actually be for more notice, but, I understand we can do whatever needs to be done by the committee, though, too.
All right.
Question on that. If we have the meeting, excuse me, set up a Zoom already, to add another person doesn't take much time at all, does it?
No, but right now, we don't have meetings set up on Zoom. So, I mean,
If we know that
you're
a
right,
meeting
but if-
will be on Zoom for whatever, somebody's missing.
Sure.
And you add another person, then the 12-hour notice isn't really.
Sure, you're right. If like tonight, you're saying if we're already doing it for Councilperson Ganfield and then
Right.
you chose to do it too, you're right. That would take less time, but still, we would probably still, most of the time, people like to practice to make sure their connection's good and all that stuff too.
Well, for the sake of conversation and to push it along, because this one doesn't seem to be too controversial, we could add in phone option just to have it, and also say notice by Thursday or Friday prior to the meeting, so that staff has ample time to set it up. I'd be okay with adding both those in, if you guys are.
So you're saying that we could always call in on a short notice, but Thursday or Friday the week before to
To
set up
Zoom
a
in.
Zoom. I agree. I think that's a good idea.
Basically, if you know you're going to be gone and you know you're going to do Zoom, you give the staff the courtesy of calling in as early as you know. But if you happen to be sick and you don't know until Monday that you're
Then you
not
could-
going to be here,
You could call in.
do the call in.
Yeah. Or if they had possibly had time to set up Zoom, it's up to them if they're like, I'm busy. But is Thursday better or Friday better?
I think if we did like a Friday by noon or something, that would be fine.
Friday by noon? Okay.
Okay.
Friday by noon and add the phone in. Is that okay with everybody?
And then the camera is deleted, requirement for camera is deleted.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. Oh, sorry.
No, I'm sorry. I mean, I'm fine. I'm not going to die on that hill, so if you don't want your camera on, then I guess.
Well,
Fine.
the thing with cameras is that I think if you can have it on, it's good. But maybe we just put a clause in there that say cameras, if possible. If there's not enough bandwidth and it's slowing you down and you can't hear the meeting, then you can turn the camera off on Zoom and it'll actually clear up the audio and stuff and help it go along. So maybe we just add a clause that says cameras if possible. That way it's not mandatory.
Cameras preferred.
Cameras preferred, yeah.
And Chairperson Dunn?
Yes, Councilman Ganfield.
Yeah, I just figured I'd throw in 2 points. A little housekeeping note. I can barely hear Councilmember DeBurr and Cruz. I don't know if it's distance from their mic or not, so I'd ask them to step a little closer there. I am in favor of a short turnaround because it's not overly complex in my mind to set up a remote connection, but I'm okay if there's a consensus of council that it needs to be Friday at noon. And I would say the same. Council should have cameras on, preferred, but not mandatory, given the discretion they may need to exercise for their connectivity.
Okay, thank you. And just as long as we're here in this moment, can we do a little check so that we don't carry on and you can't hear Councilwoman DeBur and Councilman
Cruz.
Cruz? Can we do a little check there?
Testing 1, 2, 3.
Can you hear him?
Yeah, it's interesting. For Denny's note, I can hear the first 3 or 4 seconds, and then it cuts out. So let's try Councilwoman Dunn or DeBur, excuse me, and see how that sounds.
Hi, Dustin.
Good evening.
Okay, we're
I
good?
think we'll be okay.
Okay,
I'll
let
try and
us know.
flag you if it is interrupting further.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so moving down the list, number 7, which I have as Rule 3.1, the one that would rename it staff updates, from staff updates to report of officers. And Councilwoman DeBur, you brought that up?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea to move them to the start of the meeting, so they're heard by more of the public. But I don't like the idea of renaming that to report of officers. They're directors, not necessarily officers. So I'd rather just leave it called staff updates.
I'm okay with that.
Same.
I like moving it to the front of the meeting, though.
Yeah, I think that's
So-
great. Any other input on that?
No.
So sounds like I take that as consensus to go along with that. Okay, so we'll move right on down to number 8, which Rule 3.1 would add a second public forum to allow for public to comment or ask questions related to items that were passed or not passed during the evening's agenda. Okay, so thoughts on that?
We had a very long discussion on this when we agreed to change it to the front of the meeting from being the back a few years ago. And the main reason was so that the public that wanted to speak could come in and speak. We could hear them, and then they didn't have to stay if it was a 3 or 4 hour meeting to listen to the whole thing to wait to the end. Since the public is allowed to talk at each and every issue that we vote on, I don't see a need to have 2 public forums. I think we should have one, and I think we should keep it at the front so that the public can be heard without having to sit through the whole meeting.
Thank you. Any other thoughts?
I agree with that as well. I mean, we communicate all week long, and the times between our meetings, emails, phone calls, individual meetings. There's the discussion ahead of time, and there's, for whatever reason, if it's to say after waiting 4 hours to say nice job on your vote, or to vent why the frustrations, that there is an end, and that's where I think it's, to Susan's point, best to have that at the front end and the other communication. So I wouldn't be in favor of it.
Okay.
I'd concur exactly what was said there, that there's ample opportunity for the public to reach out to us, like was said, calls, text, emails, further discussion, and then those concepts are brought forward by our discussion here. So initially I thought it'd be kind of a neat idea, but as I thought about it more, I would not be in favor of it.
I can see that side of it. I still would lean towards having it because I don't think it hurts anything. And if there are legitimate questions of staff from citizens, I don't see why it would be an issue, especially if we maintain what the mayor had pointed out as if they were, out of order once, they would be done. So I can see that side, but I'd be okay with leaving it in there.
I guess, when I think about how the meeting flows sometimes, when the public makes a comment, we don't always address it. And I think that might lead to the frustration or the desire to have a second public forum, because the point brought up by a speaker when we deliberate an item isn't addressed, isn't answered by staff or whoever. and that leads to them desiring this opportunity here. So if we were to be more responsive to comments from the public during a topic, that would alleviate this. That is, yeah.
Are you talking about like when, during public forum, when they bring up things and then sometimes it doesn't get addressed?
Well, you got the public forum in the beginning, the general one.
Right, right.
And then public speaks on items through the council meeting. There, I've seen comments made that don't necessarily get answered. And I think if we give more of an opportunity and more certainty that those questions or points made are addressed, then we wouldn't have this,
Sure.
possibly.
Can I ask a question? Are
Yeah.
you referring to like if someone brings something up during their opinion or their public input and it contains information that's not correct, having staff have the opportunity to put out factual information?
Refute it, clarify it, certainly, yeah.
I very much support that. And I don't know, but yeah, I agree with what you're saying, that it,
So Mr. Mayor, if that concept is in here anywhere else to further flesh out comments like Susan said where it may not be accurate,
Not specifically, but if they're, to your point about, or to Councilmember Cruz's point about the time that the public has to comment on an item, whether it's the presiding officer who then asks staff for clarification at the end of the public comment part, that would resolve that. Or if the presiding officer doesn't, the council members can say, hey, this came up and this has happened from time to time. This came up from this speaker. I'd love to get an answer from staff on it. Then that would be addressed at the time. So it would take real careful care on the part of the members and the mayor to make sure those questions get answered, to ensure that there's nothing left at the end that could be reasonably brought up in a second public forum.
So, Mr. Mayor, what you're saying is that it's already allowed,
Right.
so we just have to kind of push it.
Mr. Mayor,
like that.
if that I'm sorry, if that happens, if the question's been asked and the presiding officer, if for some reason somebody thinks it gets missed, do they call a point of order, or just so we all know, so we make sure it gets,
Sure. If coming from a council member, it wouldn't require a point of order. It would just be. Mr.
No,
Mayor,
coming, like a question from a public person, like during public forum, if somebody said something or made a comment and, because I do agree that sometimes I think that people ask something or say something and there could be improvement maybe about, answering the question or making sure if there's something said that's not correct, that we do our
Diligence.
yeah, okay, and make sure that the correct information is put out during this public meeting. Yes,
Kelly,
Council.
I can answer that in
Yeah.
that I know that our prior city attorney used to always mention it's very important that the city council not get into a debate during public forum with the speakers, but I would think we as a council could simply ask for the staff to clarify.
Sure.
And that's under 10.3A. It says, applicability. Anyone may address the presiding officer during the public forum regarding an issue not on the agenda. The topic must be related to city operations or business as determined by the presiding officer. No formal action on the subject presented by the speaker may be taken by the council other than a referral to city staff or a council committee or placement on an upcoming council agenda as restricted by state statute. But yes, it'd be very important, and that's why I want to make it very clear that they address the chair, so there's not a risk of a public member getting into a one-on-one with a council member, which is a position I would not want to have you guys put into.
No, but we could ask for staff clarification.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, I think that's fair. It's not spelled out that after a public comment or public forum, that then the council has a chance, but I think that that's always your privilege, if Mr. Rogers would agree, to call a point of order or a point of clarification anytime.
Okay. Okay.
That-
Yes,
Another,
Council Member Cruz.
Comment. I recall times where during public forum or public comment, there's multiple things brought up, multiple speakers, and we wait to the end before we answer any of them. I would prefer that as they're brought up a topic, then staff addresses it, next person, we choose to have that addressed. And I recall times where we wouldn't address anything until everybody was done speaking. Now, that could be long ago, but I've only been here 4.5 years. So if that's something we got to put in language or.
Sure.
I agree. Oftentimes, if we have a lot of speakers in public forum, or even on a one item, on an agenda, a resolution item, we'll have a bunch of speakers, and then we'll try to go back and address all the things. I think possibly pausing and trying to answer them to the best of our capabilities would be to our benefit.
As they go.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, what's the value added of having the second forum at the end? So I think we have, we kind of got
Sorry.
off the topic.
Okay, yep. So I agree, but I think the point that I took from that is the second, some of maybe us who've been thinking through this is the point is we want to make sure first that the right information is put out, I believe, and that questions that are legitimately asked are addressed. So I would, to get back on topic, I agree with the previous speakers. Although I was thinking that maybe this was a good idea, I always go back to first, and correct me if I'm wrong, but public forum is not required by law, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so we do have that in our procedure during council meetings to have a public forum, but I don't know that there's a benefit to it as long as the questions that are asked are answered and to the best of ability, and that the right information is out for the public who are watching our public meeting. I personally don't see the need for a second public forum at the end of the meeting.
I would agree.
I'd agree.
Okay, so any other thoughts on that?
I'm still for it, even if it goes, whatever the will is okay with me. I think that ultimately it's not what does it add, but what could, what harm does it do, especially if we pass something that there are citizens there that they have questions about how it's applicable to them immediately. There's no harm in having that. Even if we changed it to 1 minute, I would hate to see that there's I don't know who to ask, and there's so I think there would be merit in it, actually. Just having that option for someone to say, oh, you guys passed this, it affects me, what do I need to do now? Who do I need to talk to? Otherwise, they have to contact someone, email someone, then go through when they could simply get it there. So,
or stop us just like many people do. People stay after the meeting and talk to each of us already. I still don't see,
That's fine.
where they have the opportunity at the next meeting if they have other concerns. So
I guess
Yes.
I guess
Chairperson
to
Dunn.
Simon's point that there's been times where we hear public comment, close public comment, then we deliberate between us, we come up with an idea, and then some of the public still want to say, what if, that's happened a number of times. But to Gil's point, they can ask us later. I don't know. I'm a little bit indifferent on it, but that doesn't help.
either way, I'd like to make a
Chairperson Dunn?
consensus and move on.
Dustin?
Yeah, yes, Councilman Ganfield.
Thank you. I hesitate to interject. There's a little bit of lag, so I don't want to cut anybody off. I appreciate you guys' patience with that. I would also second the idea that it's not harming anything to add this in. In fact, the value add to me says I'm in favor of it. In the vein of transparency, it gives our citizenry, our engaged citizenry, an opportunity should the need arise. I don't envision it being used as a stump. If they've already used the first public forum and they've spoken on topics in instances germane to those topics, that's valuable, and we'll probably see this opportunity go unused. But I think not having it is worse, I guess, in the vein of transparency than adding it in and having it go unused. A little bit of toner and a space on the agenda is A-OK in my mind if it affords us the opportunity for rebuttal-type comments or clarifying questions. The adding it in and the risk to it of what if somebody uses it as an opportunity to emotionally respond, that may happen. And I guess part of me just wants to frankly say, so what? That's part of our job. We have to allow for that opportunity. So I'd be more in favor, and I would ask the councilpersons who don't want to do it if we could find some agreement in adding it and seeing if it's as cantankerous as we suspect or if it's a wonderful value add for that odd instance where we might need it.
Could
Yes.
I guess question to everyone, or more even Dustin, that would it be appropriate at the end of an item if we have somebody in the audience who wants to speak to something we just passed? Because that's ultimately what the second forum will be about, something during that night's agenda. I don't know. I mean, the timing of it.
But then you're just adding a mini public forum 33 times rather than just
Okay.
once at the end.
Yeah, and the quite lengthy delay to that potential would be a problem. That's why lumping it to the end. And then the dedicated citizenry that stays to share their perspective is, given that value opportunity. What do you guys think? You want to try it, or are we saying no, second forum?
Well, why don't we get rid of the first forum and leave all the comments for the end then, when everything is done?
Well, I think that's partially what Councilman DeBur was saying happened prior. We used to do it behind, and then we decided to do it in front. This is just another opportunity for the public to engage, and I don't see the harm in it right now. I may be, changing my tune in 6 months, but I'm in favor of adding them both.
For
Councilwoman
clarity,
DeBer.
did I understand Attorney Rogers to say that if we wanted to make a change, it had to be 5 voting for it? So if we
Correct.
didn't want to, if we don't want to do Rule 3.1, if we want to just leave the public forum in the front, but then do the clarity like we've talked about, we've had 4 of us say we don't want to do this Rule 3.1. So are we kind of beating that horse here?
Pretty much.
Sure. Okay. Yep. I think we have consensus that at this time that's not something that the majority of council is in favor of. So thank you for the discussion. That moves us on to rule number 9. The changes in council referrals to council requests to clarify that only the whole council can actually make or approve a referral to a committee. Members can only make the request to the whole council for consideration. And Councilwoman DeBer brought this up.
The only reason I brought it, I like it just called council referrals because it's the council that gets to make the referral. By changing it to referral request, it kind of, to me, implies that anyone, whether it be staff or the public, could make a request for a referral. So I would just recommend leaving it alone and call it council referrals.
I'm fine with that.
I'm
I
okay with
agree.
that. Okay. All right. I think that's a
Agree.
consensus. Okay, and then that takes us to number 10, Rule 3.1, which renames council updates to general discussion and announcements to more clearly describe the purpose of this time on the agenda. Council members are using this time to make announcements and to engage staff with questions. Councilman,
Exact same reason as the last one. If we leave it council updates, it's because it's the council that's making the announcement or the update or the discussion, not the staff or the public. So I just recommend leaving it alone because it's very clear then that this is the council's announcements or updates.
Maybe I can see Susan's point, but also I could see if we have a young count, if it's standing tradition, maybe we could put like a little asterisk, like council updates, and kind of put this is time, what an update is, because I know when I was first looking at council at admin policy and I saw it and I was like council updates, what are they gonna, what's an up, it would be nice just to have a little asterisk at the bottom that says, this is a time for general discussion and for council, you know what I mean?
Just make it council comments.
Or
I
council,
was just
yeah.
I was just gonna throw in there to say, call it council updates and general discussion.
But to Susan's point, when you say general discussion, that, I see what she means about
Well,
the.
that's what we do.
Well, yeah, but a public person may think they could join into the
But
discussion.
it's council updates and
Was that what you meant, Susan?
Yeah, basically, leave the word council because it is the group up here that's making the update or,
Mhm.
and I'm not stuck on the word update. If you want to change it to council
discussion.
comments or discussion, we're not allowed to discuss really something that's not on the agenda.
Yeah,
I think council updates and announcements, is that okay? I mean, because I agree
Yeah.
with Councilman Harding. It is confusing, I think both as a citizen and a council person if you're kind of new to the game. So I think the clarification would be nice.
I like that. Council updates and announcements.
I agree with that.
Yeah,
You have consensus?
Yeah,
yeah.
good choice.
Okay. Okay, that takes us to rule number 13, item number 13, rule 4.1, which changes the third next person for leading a council meeting from the most senior member to the chair of administration committee. The administration committee chair should have numerous opportunities to preside over meetings and should be fairly comfortable with chairing city council meetings in an emergency. And Councilwoman DeBur brought that up.
Yeah, I would be in favor of leaving it the way it is now, simply because this makes it political. This was set up as a safety step by councils way prior to this council, so that it was not political, or up to whoever the mayor is at that 2-year term. And I think there is value to that's the word I want, experience and knowledge that senior people may have. And I just don't like making it political by making it who the mayor appoints.
Any other comments? Or yes, Councilman Ganfield.
Yeah, I think I couldn't hear everything on the tail end, but I think I agree with Councilmember DeBur that I think leaving it with the senior council persons is okay, even though she happens to be that today. Having it be the appointed chairperson when they're not a different chairperson in rank, I think it is potentially seen as political. So I would say leave that with the senior member as well.
Okay.
I agree.
Anyone?
Agree.
Okay, I think we've got consensus then, so we'll move along. And that takes us to the number 18, which is Rule 5.18. This is an actual change to procedure, specifying the items in the consent and resolution calendar don't need to be read by title, only stated by number. And Councilwoman DeBur brought that up.
I've heard pros and cons from the public on that, about reading everything, and I know some mayors have just highlighted a few of the bigger items on there. So, I would recommend, we don't have to read it, the whole thing, but maybe highlighting some of the larger items might not be a bad idea, rather than simply say, item 17 on the agenda.
I would just ask who decides what the large item is then.
Well, to the point, I agree with that, but I've seen it where you take the big, long descriptor and shrink it down to, redoing Main Street, item 17. Really condense what the topic is or what the item is, as opposed to reading every single word that's on the list. I don't think it makes a lot of
Is it possible we could put the verbiage in there that may read items or may list them by number, just to give the discretion? I remember prior councils and mayors where they would summarize in that instance. And in others, as Mayor Green has been doing, is reading them explicitly. There's value there, and if the citizenry reaches out, says, hey, I'm listening in and I don't see the agenda in front of me, I'd like to have you keep reading them, then keep them in there. But since we're putting this into the policy, make it a may read or may summarize in their discretion.
I'm fine with that.
I'm good with that.
I'm okay with that.
Does that, just a clarification on that, does that mean that they may also just state items 17 through 33 if they want and not read it, or do they have to summarize it?
They may.
it would be my preference that they may list it just by number.
Okay, because it's my assumption that, and correct me if I'm wrong, based on the way this is written, that you could do the numbers on the entire calendar, but if items were pulled, you would still have to read the entire item pulled, which we're pretty much going to be pulling most of the big or controversial items, so they'll be read. But either way, I don't want to hold up the time. I'm okay with the may or may not and making it flexible, as long as it's kind of based on the discretion of the presiding officer.
Okay. And then number 30 is Rule 10.2, already allowing the presiding officer to establish a fixed total time limit. But it's been reworded so that doing this is more collaborative rather than the presiding officer deciding it and then having to be overruled with disagreeing members. Councilwoman DeBur.
I'm not really comfortable setting up a fixed total time limit on an item when we don't know how many potential speakers there may be, and I don't want to cut off anyone who wants to speak. I do like what some mayors have done where they simply say, next speaker, please don't repeat things that the prior speaker has said.
Mm-hmm.
But I really don't want to set a fixed time limit on a particular agenda item, which may then cut speakers off.
Any other thoughts on that? Yes, Mr.
I
Mayor.
should note, so allowing a total time limit on speaker remarks is already limited or is already allowed by the rules. So would you want to then take that out of the rules and not have a fixed limit on time?
Well, it depends. Are you talking about fixed limit, like, for instance, you have 3 minutes to speak or 5 minutes? Or are you talking
No, this is
that
total time.
Total time is
Yeah.
30 minutes. So if I have 8 speakers that come up, I guess 8 times 3 would be 24, but 8 times 5 is 40 minutes. So now somebody doesn't get to speak.
So then the question is that okay to then remove out the verbiage about a total time limit?
Because it's already in there.
Already there.
I'm okay with removing it because I think people should be allowed to speak. So, but I'm okay with it, removing it.
Yeah, it says total speaker input on any subject under consideration can be limited to a fixed period by the presiding officer. So
Can
we
be.
just strike that, right?
Can be, but doesn't have to be.
Correct.
So
I don't know that you want to get rid of that, in my opinion, because, you could have somebody, like, hijack a meeting.
Is this referring to the minute limit per speaker or the total amount of time on one
Total
issue?
amount.
Yeah.
we wouldn't necessarily know on a topic how long it's going to be deliberated. It could go 20 minutes, go 45 minutes.
But to Kelly's point, it could go 4 hours.
Which it
Well,
has, not in the too recent
yeah,
past,
I
or
mean-
not maybe 4 hours, but pretty close.
But I'm confused here. It's part of this verbiage says the fixed time limit would be established by consensus in the first place. We don't know ahead of time how to set the time.
So-
Am I mixed up?
I have an idea. So why don't we leave it the same, but tweak it a little bit that says it can be limited by the presiding officer or supermajority of council if necessary. That way we have the flexibility. It stays the same because right now in the rules, the presiding officer has the power to set a time limit if they want, but I think having that check and balance of council being able to overrule that or do it. So we basically leave it the same and just add.
We have that anyway by what was put in here about the
That's
supermajority vote.
yeah, that's true.
Right. In the end, in my thought is the council still has the power, right?
Correct.
But it's there. I would hope it wouldn't be used very often, but I think it's that's just my thought. So I guess what is the consensus?
Leave it the same.
Leave it the same or make the change that we've discussed?
Leave it like it originally was. Don't make the change.
Correct.
Correct.
Leave it as it now is.
Yeah, that's the best way.
Okay, so consensus is at this point to leave it the same as it was.
And not make the change. Yeah.
No change. Okay. Okay, I think that, and I know we're running out of time here, the referral process, I'm just kind of surprised we haven't talked about that, but,
I do want to bring that up.
Okay.
But,
go ahead.
I mean,
I think it's item 25. right?
Okay.
25, and actually 26, I want to have a quick comment, but on the referrals, I remember when I was first on council, we had this deliberation about, what we can do and how we can do it. And it was said that we should have wide latitude on topics brought forward. We're the elected officials. There's a concern by the public. Let's bring it forward. We get 4 people that says, yeah, let's deliberate further and have staff look into some things. And to restrict it by having to have something in the packet, I don't agree with that at all. That interferes with our ability to function as a council.
Okay, I'd like to, because I'm the one that I think was most concerned about. So my thought to that is I don't take it as restricting at all. I take it as oftentimes when a last minute referral has been brought up, and I'm going back to what has been brought up as, I guess, a gentleman or ladies, if you will, rule, that it was customary to bring the referral up ahead of time. And the thought process, to my understanding, is it gives people a chance to think and know what they're actually saying yes to or saying no to. Bringing last minute items up, unless there's a good reason that it needs to be last item or last minute, first, it just doesn't, I don't appreciate that it doesn't give the public a time to process it. I don't appreciate that it doesn't give council time to process it. Obviously, it still says in the rules that if for some reason the council or the presiding officer thought that it was what do we call it?
Exigent.
Okay, exigent. Then we could still move forward. But sometimes when things are brought up, I may say no to it. And then if I would have had a little time to think about it, maybe I would have said yes. I think that I'm not trying to take away anybody's right to have their voice. But the rule that is kind of an unspoken rule that doesn't seem to be followed anymore, especially when you're a new person, I feel like there's sometimes where it feels like, are we taking advantage of that, So that's my thought on it.
I would agree with what Councilmember Dunn or the chair said. I think I read through it and I think it's hashed out really well. It still gives us, with a 2/3, with the majority of council, the ability to even allow an exigent referral in any case. Actually, if you think of it that way, if there are 5 people who want to hear that referral, even if it wasn't about the night, council has that discretion. So the presiding officer could strike it down. Council could overrule it. So with that being said, I also agree. I don't think that referrals are bad or that us bringing them up. I do think we sometimes we take an hour to hash out what the referral even is, and that to me is not productive time. So I think what's in there, my consensus is to go with that in the policy. I like it.
Any other
I would
thoughts?
think one comment on it.
Yeah. Yes, Councilman Ganfield.
No problem. I think I'm in favor of a heads up that we can say, hey, I'm planning to make a referral about this topic. I think requiring it to be presented in writing and into the packet may not be necessary. In addition, admin policy, I want to say it's 211, but don't quote me on that, already states that council or mayor may request or require that a moving person brings it in writing. So we could ask that it's reduced to writing in the moment regardless, so that there's not a lengthy period of time where we hash out what that referral and or motion may look like. So the policy that requires it to shorten its time frame already exists. I'd be in favor of this policy without the requirement that the entire motion be sent in writing into the packet deadline. I think giving a heads up should be required, but not necessarily the entire motion in writing unless requested by council.
May I ask something to that? Now, if we're not, how would we communicate it? Because to me, it's going to come into an email. So it's already in writing. And I'm just curious, how would it not be in writing already?
And I'm simply stating that the topic to be referred upon would be, but not the entire motion, perhaps. They don't have to have that that written out into the packet in advance, but at least a heads up of what the topic is going to be so that it's not a blindside.
To Council Member Ganfield's point, again, let's say you miss the deadline and you send out an email to council on Saturday, I'm going to refer this, it is five council members could could allow it and see it as okay, and majority of council says go for it. So, to me, it's well thought out, because there are lots of different ways you could still do a referral without even putting it in the packet. This just says that that's our goal, to get it in the packet, and if you don't make it to the packet, you need to have 5 council members that support you bringing it forward that night, or it simply has to be about something at that meeting that night.
In the past, it was an explanation of what you wanted to do, but I don't think it was the full verbiage of the motion. But I would be interested if we continue this part of it at the next meeting, would be to get feedback from the city clerk as to whether that's helpful to her if the actual motion is given ahead of time, or whether that's something that she doesn't need.
If I could give an example, I look at these referrals as old topics that we've hashed over in recent times, maybe not for the new people, but, or if it's a fresh topic, like I want to make a referral to discuss the results of No Mo May and some alternatives to make it less caustic to some of the public. That's very broad. We know what the topic is. We've all experienced phone calls on it. That should be sufficient. That's wide latitude. Let's talk about it. Or is that something you want to have in the packet? Like I just said, I want to talk about No Mo May and the results. I mean, how elaborate does the staff want it to be? And let me point out then that if I read this right, the Monday prior to the next council meeting, so it's a week before, is when they want it to staff to put in the packet for the Wednesday release. Have to be. That eliminates a week of activity going on. I'm not in favor of that timeline at all.
Mr. Mayor, can I get an explanation maybe for what did you envision that, is it just a little, like the motion and then a quick little summary? I mean, we're not looking for pages and pages here, or maybe we are. What are we looking for?
Right.
For this?
Typically, a motion is just going to be my motion is to have this, have No Mo May discussed at committee of the whole for options to change. And then maybe a short blurb. I've heard some complaints, so comments about it. Maybe we could look at this. And it could really just be an email that gets into the council packet. But the goal then, the public could be able to see it as well, to know that this is going to be brought up as a topic. And maybe can engage on council members beforehand also. So again, to Councilor Ganfield's point, I just wouldn't want council to be blindsided by hearing something only at the meeting itself. And for something like No Mo May or other topics, generally pretty well in advance. And if there was something that it was kind of emergent that came up, or exigent, then council could decide to hear it, and I probably would just allow it anyway.
Okay. To keep moving here, so with that explanation, can we get a consensus as to whether or not I guess first, is there any further discussion that anybody wants to talk about? Or can we get the consensus? It's either we're going to change as proposed, or we're not going to change. Consensus to change. Can I get a head nod for consensus to change?
I'd like to try it.
I'd like to try it. Okay.
Okay, we try it.
Okay. So we've got 4 folks shaking their heads yes, and so I guess that's the and we got a thumbs up from Councilman Ganfield. So we'll try the change here on that. Okay. Any other? That was the list.
Quick one.
26, I'm sorry, yes.
Work sessions, I believe it's standard that we record those now. I'd like to have that. I didn't see it in the information here, but if we have an opportunity and we meet as a body, I'd like to see it recorded and posted. I don't know if that's formally done. I've requested it in the past, but I'd like to see that added.
Sure. And if I can note, it says recorded, it's audio posted, or audio created and posted to the city website under our current customs. So I can put that into the doc if you like.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, I just have one more item on my original list, and then I'll ask for any further. So the one item that I had of concern for me, and I don't know that it's necessarily a concern because I know this is, but saying the Pledge of Allegiance, I have no problem with saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I have great memories. I feel like it stirs up your patriotic and civic heart. I do have, you know, we are not all Christians in our community. So the under God part does bother me when we're in this neutral setting. I'm assuming that I might be the minority, but I do want to publicly say that during this time. Are there any other concerns about that?
I would ask, I see the concern. It's actually been quite controversial throughout history since the under God was added in 1954, that there's been many cases, I'm sure Kevin's familiar with. So my question would be, because I like saying the Pledge of Allegiance too, and I think the sentiment is great. Is there any case law, I was trying to find any, that would, as long as we make it voluntary, that it would be okay for us, correct? There's no case law that says we can't.
Right, and it's the separation of church and state notion. The cases say that this is a historical custom, and so it sort of pushes off the church-state problem. And so it's custom, and so if council decides that it wishes to add that to its rules of procedure, no problem, but mandatory is a problem.
Fair.
And I'll go on record and say I want it to say under God.
Yeah, I don't mind doing the Pledge of Allegiance if it's done as it's really written.
'Cause it's
I,
written.
I as well feel that way. And the other thing that would be really nice, since we have you and I on a great high school with a great vocal group, it'd be nice to have someone come in and they could sing God Bless America or something like that right after we say the Pledge of Allegiance. And I think that would be a good experience for the high school kids or the college kids or whichever song that they would choose to sing.
I think it'd be great if we started that at the council meeting tonight, and what could be some chances we'd have Boy Scouts available to lead us with that.
I think that'd be fantastic.
I think it'd be great too.
Real quick, I would support putting it in there to try it and see how it goes and get public feedback. So, but it originally did not have under God in it, just to let you know. It was put in 1954. The original pledge was written without under God. They put it in due
There's
to
a lot of things in history that were original that we
I
don't
know.
do anymore.
I think it was put in before any of us were born, so.
1954 is when it got put in. And it's okay. I'm okay. I was letting people know I like history. I'm a little bit of a nerd. So
Okay, any further discussion regarding changes to this document? Okay, so we need the recommendation for approval to,
I'd make a motion to recommend approval of of this document with the changes discussed tonight.
any seconds?
Second.
I'll second.
Question.
Yes.
And I think from what Mr. Rogers said, that it'll be rewritten, redistributed, and then we'll
Correct.
hash it over one more time. Is that an official word, hash over?
The only question is whether it comes back to committee or it's ready for council action, regular meeting action.
Committee would be good. More, then you get public input.
Any
Well,
thoughts
you'd
on
get
that?
public input at council also.
But if there's issues with it, then we wouldn't have time to change it as fast. So I'd be okay with taking it to a committee first, just to make sure.
There's no hurry, so committee's fine.
Sure. Consensus on taking it back? I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Mr.
If I
Mayor.
could just note for going with committee, as you're saying, you can then strike different parts of the document and change it, where if it came before council, you'd have to then amend, and it'd be a much more difficult process.
Okay. Okay, so consensus to bring back these changes as recommended to committee. Do we have consensus for?
Is it a vote?
Is it a,
How's the motion go? Kevin, is it a voice vote?
Voice vote for the recommendation.
Okay.
okay, so all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay? Okay, we have consensus or direction for staff to move forward, and that will end our meeting. We need about 10 minutes, I believe,
Do you
to
need
make.
a motion to adjourn?
I'm sorry. Can we have a motion to adjourn? Okay. so
Second.
moved. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Nay? Okay, so now we need about 10 minutes to move into the council meeting from here on out. Thank you very much.